I can't close my legs, it hurts. Poor Waitress cried. She stumbled between the red vinyl booths, her legs pressed together like every step was agony. Black and white checkered floor, the smell of coffee and grease from the griddle. And three made men froze as she whispered the sentence that cracked the diner in half. I cannot close my legs. It hurts. Her voice was barely audible, the bruises were not. And what that mafia boss did next silenced the entire town. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's jump right back in. Christopher Giancarlo had broken enough men to know the difference between fear and genuine suffering. But nothing prepared him for the sight of the girl collapsing against the chrome-edged counter. 22, maybe 23. Dark circles carved beneath her eyes like someone had pressed thumbs into soft clay. Black and white uniform torn at the hem. One shoe missing entirely, the other scuffed beyond recognition. Her light brown hair stuck to her neck in damp strands, and when she moved, every muscle seemed to scream protest. Giancarlo set down his espresso cup with deliberate precision, every instinct firing at once. The other men, Victor and Dante, went absolutely still. The jukebox in the corner faded until there was only the waitress's ragged breathing and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Even the night cook had stopped moving, frozen mid-flip with a spatula suspended over the griddle. She stopped in the center of the dining area, legs visibly trembling, hands clutching her lower abdomen. Her face was flushed with pain and something darker. Shame, terror, the kind that came from being hurt in ways that left scars no one could see but everyone could sense. Giancarlo rose slowly, palms visible, movements careful. You hurt, sweetheart. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual command, the kind of voice that had ordered executions transformed into something almost gentle. The girl nodded. Tears tracked through the makeup she had used to cover a bruise on her cheekbone. Fresh bruise, maybe 12 hours old, the kind that would darken by morning. My landlord. She swallowed hard, the motion painful to watch. Last night. He said the rent was late again, said there were other ways to pay. The way she stood was not modesty. It was pain. Deep, radiating pain that made her bite her lip with every small shift of weight, every attempt to find a position that did not send agony shooting through her body. What is your name? He asked. Lyra. She whispered it like confessing a sin. Lyra Hart. He forced his way in. Pushed me down when I fought. I landed on the bed frame. Something metal caught me. I think something tore inside. I tried to go to the hospital, but I do not have insurance, and they said without a police report, they could not help with the cost. Victor's breath hitched sharply behind Giancarlo. Dante muttered something vicious in Italian, the kind of curse that invoked saints and suggested violence in equal measure. Giancarlo's expression hardened into something cold and purposeful, the mask he wore when making decisions that would change lives permanently. You came to the right place, Lyra. We are going to help you. I promise. He moved around the counter with careful steps, each one measured, mindful of her obvious distress. When he reached her, she flinched but did not pull away. She had nowhere left to run. The realization sat in her eyes like defeat. He gestured to the nearest booth. Sit. Carefully. Do not try to be brave right now. Lyra sank into the red vinyl with a gasp that spoke of agony barely contained. She gripped the table edge, knuckles white, breathing through her nose like someone had taught her to manage pain. I should not have come here. I know who you are. Everyone knows. But I did not know where else to go. The police, they never help girls like me. And my landlord, he is connected to people. He told me if I talked, if I made trouble. Giancarlo settled across from her, his midnight blue suit immaculate despite the late hour. 3:30 in the morning and he still looked like he could walk into a boardroom or a funeral with equal ease. Connected to whom? She shook her head, wincing at the movement. I do not know names, just that he bragged about it. Said he had friends in low places who would make me disappear if I caused problems. Said no one would believe a waitress over a property owner anyway. Said girls like me were disposable. The word hung in the air like smoke. Disposable. Dante positioned himself by the entrance, arms crossed, watching the street through the plate glass windows. Victor moved to the kitchen, murmuring something to the night cook that made the man nod quickly and retreat further back. The diner went quiet except for the hum of the industrial refrigerator and Lyra's uneven breathing. Giancarlo leaned forward slightly. How long has this been happening? 3 months. Her voice broke, fractured into pieces. Since I lost my other job at the department store. They closed down. He offered me the apartment cheap when I was desperate, said I reminded him of his daughter. I thought I was lucky. Then the first night he showed up drunk, trying the door handle. Testing. It escalated. Last night was the worst. I told him I would report him and he just laughed. Said I had no proof. Said everyone would think I was just a tenant who did not want to pay rent. Victor returned, crouching beside the booth with surprising grace for a man his size. I called Doc Ferraro. He is on his way. Discreet. No records unless you want them. No questions asked. Lyra's eyes widened. I cannot afford a private doctor. I work minimum wage plus tips. I have maybe $70 in my account. You are not paying. Giancarlo's tone left no room for argument, the voice that had negotiated territories and settled disputes with finality. Dante, roll down the metal shutters. I want this place locked tight. No one comes in without my say-so. Victor, call the others. I want a perimeter established within 15 minutes. The shutters descended with a heavy clatter, transforming the diner from public space to private fortress. The overhead pendant lights cast dramatic shadows, turning the cheerful 50s aesthetic into something more serious, protective, dangerous. Lyra stared at Giancarlo, confusion and hope warring on her face. Why are you helping me? You do not even know me. I am nobody. Giancarlo was quiet for a moment, studying her face. The fear, the pain, the desperate hope that someone, anyone, might actually do something instead of looking away like everyone else had. Because nobody else will. And because men like your landlord operate on the assumption that girls like you have nowhere to turn. That assumption needs correction. Victor pulled up a chair, its legs scraping against the checkered floor. Boss, if this landlord is connected like she says, we might be stepping into someone else's territory. Could start a war we do not need. Then we find out whose territory. Giancarlo never broke eye contact with Lyra, and we decide whether those connections matter more than doing what is right. Dante spoke from his position by the door, his accent thicker than usual. Word will spread fast. The whole town will know you intervened for a waitress. They will ask questions, make assumptions. Let them ask. Something shifted in Giancarlo's expression, something that looked almost like purpose, like a man who had been searching for meaning in violence and finally found it in protection. Let them know that there are still lines even I will not let men cross. That even in my world, there are rules. And one of those rules is that you do not prey on the vulnerable and expect to walk away unscathed. The door to the kitchen opened and a man in his 60s entered, carrying a worn leather medical bag. Salt and pepper hair, steady hands, the look of someone who had seen enough to not be shocked by anything. Doc Ferraro. He took one look at Lyra and his expression turned grave with professional concern. Christopher. He nodded at Giancarlo, then focused on Lyra with a gentleness that came from decades of practice. I am going to examine you, young lady, with your permission, and then we are going to discuss your options and what kind of care you need. Lyra looked at Giancarlo one more time, searching his face for deception or ulterior motive. Finding only grim determination and something that might have been anger on her behalf, she nodded slowly. Okay, please help me. It really hurts. Giancarlo stood, giving her space but not distance. Victor, Dante, with me. Give the doctor room to work. They moved to the far corner of the diner near the jukebox, voices low but urgent. Giancarlo pulled out his phone, the screen casting blue light across his face. Through the reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser, he could see Doc Ferraro speaking softly to Lyra, her responses barely audible. After 5 minutes, the doctor approached them, his expression grim. She needs more than I can do here. Internal injuries, possibly severe. I need my clinic, proper equipment, better lighting. The examination I can do here is too limited. Giancarlo's jaw tightened. How bad? Bad enough that if we wait until morning, we risk permanent damage. Doc Ferraro kept his voice clinical, but his eyes held anger. This was not an accident. The pattern of bruising suggests sustained force, and based on what I am seeing, this is not the first time she has been hurt. There are older injuries, partially healed. This man has been escalating. The words settled like lead in Giancarlo's stomach. My car is out back. We leave now. Doc Ferraro nodded. I will meet you at my clinic. 20 minutes. He glanced at Lyra, who was watching them with fear in her eyes. Be gentle with her. She is in shock as much as pain. Giancarlo crossed back to the booth, crouching so he was eye level with Lyra. We need to take you somewhere with better equipment. My car is waiting. Can you walk or do I need to carry you? I can try. Her voice was small, defeated. I do not want to be a burden. You are not a burden. The firmness in his tone surprised even him. You are someone who needs help. There is a difference. Victor moved ahead, opening the back door of the diner that led to the alley. Dante brought the car around, a black sedan with tinted windows, engine purring in the 3:45 a.m. silence. Giancarlo helped Lyra to her feet, her gasp of pain cutting through him like a blade. When her legs nearly gave out, he did not hesitate. He lifted her carefully, one arm under her knees, the other supporting her back, mindful of where she might be injured. I can walk, she protested weakly. Save your strength. His voice was gentle but absolute. The drive to Doc Ferraro's clinic took 18 minutes through empty streets. Lyra sat in the back seat, Giancarlo beside her, Victor driving, Dante in the passenger seat maintaining constant surveillance of their surroundings. She leaned against the door at first, trying to maintain distance, but every bump in the road sent visible pain across her face. Halfway there, Giancarlo spoke quietly. You can lean on me. It will hurt less than bracing against the door. She hesitated, then slowly shifted closer. When the car hit a pothole, she instinctively grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so clearly weakened. Sorry, she whispered. Do not apologize. He did not pull away, not for needing help, not for being hurt, and especially not for surviving. Her eyes filled with tears she had been holding back since entering the diner. I thought about not surviving. Earlier tonight, when he left, I thought maybe it would be easier. Giancarlo's voice went hard. That is exactly what men like him count on. That you will be too ashamed or too tired or too hurt to fight back. That you will blame yourself instead of him. I did fight back. That is why it got so bad. I tried to push him away and he got angrier, said I was ungrateful, said he could have thrown me out on the street but he was being generous letting me stay. Generosity does not come with conditions like that. Giancarlo looked out the window at the passing streetlights. Real generosity does not require payment in fear or pain. The clinic was in a quiet neighborhood, an unmarked building that looked residential from the outside. Doc Ferraro was already there, lights on in the back, door unlocked. He led them to an examination room that was surprisingly well equipped. Medical instruments gleamed under bright lights. The space smelled of antiseptic and something else. Safety, professionalism. Giancarlo carried Lyra to the examination table, setting her down with care. I will be right outside. Doc Ferraro is the best. You are safe here. She grabbed his hand before he could pull away. Do not go far. Please. I will be on the other side of that door. He squeezed her hand gently. No one gets past me. No one. The examination took 45 minutes. Giancarlo paced the waiting area, Victor and Dante flanking the entrance. Every sound from the examination room made him tense. He had ordered violence, witnessed brutality, orchestrated revenge, but listening to Lyra's stifled cries of pain as the doctor worked felt different, more personal, more enraging. Finally, Doc Ferraro emerged, wiping his hands, his expression dark. Internal tearing. Severe bruising to the pelvic region. Possible fracture to the tailbone. She is going to need rest, medication, and physical therapy. The injuries are consistent with sexual assault, violent assault. Can you document it? Giancarlo's voice was cold. Everything, photos, written report, the works, already done. The doctor met his eyes. But she is terrified to press charges. She thinks no one will believe her. And based on what she told me about this landlord's connections, she might be right to be scared. Let me worry about the landlord. Giancarlo moved toward the examination room door. Can she be moved? Not safely. She needs to rest here for at least 12 hours. I have a recovery room upstairs. She can stay as long as necessary. Then we stay too. Giancarlo looked at Victor. Get the men to rotate shifts. No one approaches this building without clearance. Inside the examination room, Lyra was lying on her side, curled into a protective ball, a blanket pulled up to her chin. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. When Giancarlo entered, she looked at him with something that broke through his carefully maintained armor. Trust. Desperate, fragile trust from someone who had every reason to trust no one. Doc Ferraro says you need to rest. His voice was softer than he had used in years. There is a room upstairs, safe, guarded. You will not be alone. Will you stay? The question was barely audible. I know it is strange. I know you do not know me. But I am scared if I close my eyes he will be there. That this is a dream, and I will wake up back in that apartment. Giancarlo pulled a chair close to the examination table, settled into it with the patience of someone who had waited out far more dangerous situations. I will stay, and when you wake up, you will still be here, still safe. I give you my word. Why are you doing this? Tears slipped down her cheeks. Men like you do not help people like me. Men like me do not often get the chance to do something right. He looked at her steadily. Consider this my chance. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. Giancarlo sat there watching her sleep, this broken girl who had stumbled into his diner and cracked something open inside him he thought had died years ago. The need to protect, not for profit, not for power, just to protect someone who deserved it. By 6:30 in the morning, Giancarlo had made 8 phone calls. Victor stood near the window of Doc Ferraro's office, reviewing notes on a legal pad. Dante returned from a reconnaissance run with a manila folder thick with documents. Upstairs, Lyra slept under the influence of painkillers, finally getting rest her body desperately needed. Giancarlo spread the contents of the folder across the desk. Photographs, property records, credit reports, background checks. The face that stared back at him from a driver's license photo was unremarkable. Kenneth Grimes, 52 years old. Owned 4 rental properties in the neighborhood, clean credit, no criminal record. On paper, he looked like every other small-time landlord in the city. Victor tapped the legal pad. But there is more. Always is with men like that. Dante pulled out a second set of documents, these printed on cheaper paper, clearly obtained through less official channels. Grimes does not own those properties outright. They are financed through a holding company called Riverside Investments, and Riverside is connected to the Calabrese family. Giancarlo went very still. The Calabrese family operated 2 neighborhoods over. Not major players, but connected enough to make problems for anyone who crossed them. They ran protection rackets, loan sharking, some light trafficking. Not his territory, not his concern. Until now. How deep is the connection? Giancarlo kept his voice neutral. Deep enough. Dante slid another document across the desk. Grimes has been paying tribute to the Calabrese operation for 3 years. 10% of his rental income. In exchange, they provide muscle when tenants cause trouble. Keep the cops from looking too closely at building code violations. Make inconvenient complaints disappear. So if Lyra had gone to the police would have made a report that went nowhere. Victor's voice was flat. A detective or two on the Calabrese payroll would have made sure of it. Girl like her, no family, no resources, against a property owner with connections? She would have been labeled a troublemaker, maybe even charged with filing a false report. Giancarlo picked up the photograph of Grimes, studied it. The man had soft features, thinning hair, the kind of face that could smile at tenants while calculating how to exploit them. And the assault on Lyra? Not his first. Dante pulled out 3 more files. I found 2 other complaints from the past year. Both women, both former tenants, both cases dropped due to insufficient evidence. One of the women left town entirely. The other recanted her statement after her apartment was broken into and trashed. A pattern. Giancarlo set the photo down with precise control. He finds vulnerable women, offers them cheap housing, then uses that vulnerability against them. And the Calabrese family provides cover. Exactly. Victor moved to stand beside the desk, which means we have a problem. If we move against Grimes, the Calabrese family will see it as moving against them. Could start something we are not prepared for. Or it could be an opportunity to send a message. Giancarlo leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. That there are lines even connected men cannot cross. That preying on defenseless women will not be tolerated, regardless of who provides the protection. Boss, with respect, the Calabrese family will not see it that way. Dante's voice carried warning. They will see it as us disrespecting their arrangement, moving on their territory without permission. Angelo Calabrese is not known for his understanding nature. Then we make sure Angelo understands this is not about territory. Giancarlo's voice went cold. This is about principle. There are rules in our world. One of those rules is that you do not prey on the helpless and call it business. The legal route is blocked. Victor stated it like the fact it was. Any charges filed will disappear. Any lawyer Lyra hires will be outmaneuvered by Calabrese connections. The system will not help her. Then we bypass the system. Giancarlo stood, moved to the window, looked out at the quiet street. We handle this the old way. Direct, personal, and we make sure everyone understands why it is happening. You want to go after a Calabrese asset. Dante said it slowly, making sure he understood. Without asking permission. Without negotiating territory. Just take him. I want to deliver justice to a man who has been escaping it for too long. Giancarlo turned back to face them. And I want to make clear that this is not about business or territory. This is about drawing a line. Some things are not acceptable, regardless of who you pay tribute to. Victor and Dante exchanged glances. This was unusual. Giancarlo built his reputation on calculated moves. Strategic alliances, careful negotiations. Going after someone under Calabrese protection without diplomatic groundwork was risky, potentially explosive. What about the girl? Victor asked. If this goes wrong, if the Calabrese family retaliates, she becomes a target. Then we make sure she is protected. Giancarlo's tone left no room for argument. And we make sure Grimes understands that what happened to Lara was not just wrong, it was his last mistake. How do you want to play this? Dante closed the folder. Carefully. Giancarlo returned to the desk, began organizing the documents into a specific order. First, we gather more intelligence. I want to know Grimes's routine, his weaknesses, who he talks to, where he feels safe. Second, we reach out to a neutral party, someone who can communicate with Angelo Calabrese without triggering immediate retaliation. You want to negotiate? I want to explain. There is a difference. Giancarlo picked up the files on the other victims. We present this to Angelo as a problem that reflects badly on his organization, that having a predator operating under his protection damages his reputation. We give him the opportunity to distance himself from Grimes before we move. And if he refuses, then we move anyway. Giancarlo's expression was absolute, and we deal with the consequences. But I will not let that man walk away from what he did to Lyra just because he pays tribute to the right people. The office went quiet. Upstairs, they could hear Doc Ferraro moving around, checking on his patient. Outside, the city was waking up. People heading to work, unaware that in this unmarked building, a decision was being made that would ripple through the underworld like a stone thrown in still water. Giancarlo looked at his men. We do this right. We do this smart. But we do this. No girl should have to suffer because the system failed and criminals provided cover. That ends now. Victor nodded slowly. I will reach out to contacts, see who can get a message to Angelo Calabrese, and I will keep gathering information on Grimes. Dante picked up the folder. By tomorrow we will know everything about him, every weakness, every secret. Good. Giancarlo moved toward the door. I am going to check on Lyra. When she wakes up, she deserves to know we are handling this, that she does not have to be afraid anymore. He climbed the stairs to the recovery room, pushed open the door quietly. Lyra was still asleep, her face finally peaceful, the lines of pain smoothed away by medication and exhaustion. He settled back into the chair beside her bed, prepared to wait. Because that was what protection meant. Not just removing the threat, but being present, being the wall between her and danger, being the proof that someone cared enough to stay. Lyra woke at 2:15 in the afternoon. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion crossing her face before memory returned. The pain was still there, dulled by medication, but present. She turned her head and saw Giancarlo in the chair beside her bed, awake, watching the door with the vigilance of someone who had made a promise. You stayed. Her voice was rough from sleep and crying. I said I would. He stood, moved to pour water from a pitcher on the bedside table. Small sips. Doc Ferraro said you will be dehydrated. She accepted the glass with shaking hands, managed 3 small sips before her stomach protested. How long was I asleep? Almost 8 hours. Your body needed it. He took the glass back, set it down carefully. How is the pain? Better. Not gone, but better. She shifted slightly, winced. Where am I? Doc Ferraro's clinic. You have been safe here, but we need to move you somewhere more secure, somewhere you can rest properly while we handle the situation. Fear flickered across her face. The apartment. I need to get my things. My documents, my photos of my mother, everything I own is there. We already sent people. Victor collected everything personal. Clothes, papers, photographs. It is being moved to a safe location as we speak. You are not going back to that apartment. Ever. But the rent. He will come looking for me. Let him look. Giancarlo's voice was flat. He will not find you, and by the time we are done, he will have more pressing concerns than a missing tenant. Doc Ferraro entered with a wheelchair, his expression professionally neutral. Time to move you, my dear. I have given Mr. Giancarlo instructions for your care. Pain medication every 6 hours. Rest. Minimal movement for the next 72 hours. Where am I going? Lyra looked between them. Somewhere safe. Giancarlo helped her into the wheelchair, his movements gentle despite his obvious strength. Somewhere my people can watch over you properly, where you can heal without fear. The safe house was in a quiet residential neighborhood, a two-story home with a fenced yard and minimal street visibility. Nothing about it suggested danger or criminal enterprise. It looked like any other middle-class home, which was exactly the point. Invisible, unremarkable, protected. Victor met them at the door. Perimeter is secure, 4 men on rotation, windows reinforced, back exit established if we need to move her quickly. Inside, the house was furnished simply but comfortably. Giancarlo carried Lyra upstairs to a bedroom that had clearly been prepared for her arrival. Clean sheets, soft lighting, her belongings already arranged on a dresser. The photographs of her mother placed carefully on the nightstand. Lyra's eyes filled with tears when she saw them. "You brought everything. Everything we could find." Victor stood in the doorway. "If we missed something, make a list. We will retrieve it. Thank you." She looked at the 3 men surrounding her, these dangerous criminals treating her with more care than anyone had in months. "I do not understand why you are doing this, what you want from me." Giancarlo settled her into the bed, pulled the covers up. "We want you to heal, to be safe, to not spend every night terrified, that is all. People do not do things for nothing." Her voice carried the weight of experience. "Everyone wants something. Then consider this payment for all the times no one helped when they should have." He moved toward the door. "There is food in the kitchen. Medication on the nightstand with instructions. One of my men will be right outside this door at all times. If you need anything, anything at all, you tell them. What if he finds me? He will not." The certainty in Giancarlo's voice was absolute. "But if somehow he does, he will have to go through 6 armed men to reach you. And he is not that brave." Dante appeared in the doorway. "First shift is me. Kitchen is stocked. Doc left instructions for meals. Easy stuff. Soup, toast, nothing heavy." Lyra nodded, exhaustion pulling at her again despite the long sleep. "Will you be back?" She looked at Giancarlo. "Or is this goodbye?" "I will be back." He paused at the door. "This is not goodbye, Lyra. This is just the beginning of making sure you never have to be afraid again." Night fell over the safe house like a blanket. Lyra lay in the bed, windows open slightly to let in cool air, the sound of crickets and distant traffic creating a peaceful backdrop. She could hear movement downstairs, quiet footsteps, the murmur of men changing shifts. At 8 o'clock, Dante brought soup and crackers. At 10:30, another man she had not met checked the locks and windows. At midnight, she heard Victor's voice downstairs, giving instructions in that calm, competent way of his. She should have been terrified, should have been planning escape, should have been questioning everything about this situation. But instead, for the first time in 3 months, she felt safe. The knowledge that someone was watching, that someone would come if she called, that someone had decided she mattered enough to protect. It was overwhelming, surreal, and desperately needed. At 2 in the morning, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, she made her way slowly downstairs. Every step hurt, but the medication kept it manageable. Dante looked up from his position at the kitchen table, alert immediately. "You should be resting." "I could not sleep. Too quiet." She leaned against the doorframe. "I am used to city noise. This is too peaceful." He smiled slightly. "That is a problem I never thought I would hear. Too much peace. Is he really going to help me?" She asked what had been weighing on her mind all evening. "Or is this just temporary, just until it becomes inconvenient?" "Boss does not do temporary." Dante's voice carried conviction. "When he makes a promise, he keeps it, even when it costs him. Especially when it costs him." "Why, though? What is in this for him?" "Maybe nothing. Maybe that is the point." Dante stood, moved to pour her water. "Sometimes doing the right thing is its own reward." Boss has not had many chances to do right things. This is his chance. He is not going to waste it. Lyra accepted the water, looked out the window at the dark street. A car sat parked at the corner, two figures visible inside. More protection, more watchers. An army of dangerous men dedicated to keeping one broken waitress safe. It felt impossible, like a dream she would wake from. But the pain in her body was real. The medication bottle on the counter was real. The sound of Dante's steady breathing behind her was real. This was happening. This protection, this care. This strange salvation delivered by a mafia boss who had decided she mattered. And for tonight, for this one precious night, she let herself believe it would last. Giancarlo returned to the safe house at 7:30 the next morning, carrying a leather briefcase and the weight of information that would change everything. Lyra was awake, sitting carefully in the living room, sipping tea that Dante had prepared. She looked better, color returning to her face, the haunted look in her eyes slightly less pronounced. He set the briefcase on the coffee table with deliberate care. "We need to talk about Kenneth Grimes." Her hand trembled slightly against the teacup. "What about him?" "About what we found." Giancarlo opened the briefcase, pulled out the first folder. "Over the past 18 hours, my people have been gathering information. What they discovered is worse than we initially thought." Victor entered from the kitchen, carrying his own set of documents. "Boss, the last witness just confirmed her statement. That makes 7. 7? Lyra's voice was small. 7 women. Giancarlo spread photographs across the coffee table, all tenants of Grimes within the past 4 years, all vulnerable, all targeted. He pointed to the first photo. Jessica Ramirez, 24, single mother. Grimes assaulted her 6 months after she moved in. She reported it to the police. The case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. Lyra stared at the photograph. What happened to her? She moved 3 states away. Victor's voice was flat, too afraid to stay in the city, left family, friends, a job she loved. Just ran. Giancarlo moved to the second photo. Emma Pete, 19, college student, working 2 jobs to afford tuition. Grimes waited until she was behind on rent, then offered the same deal he offered you. She refused. He assaulted her anyway. Did she report it? She tried. Victor pulled out a police report, filed a complaint, gave a detailed statement. A detective came to interview her once. Then nothing. The case went cold. No follow-up, no investigation. Just disappeared into the system. Because of the Calabrese connection. Lyra's voice carried understanding. They made it go away. Exactly. Giancarlo continued through the photographs. Sarah Kim, 26, immigrant, limited English. Grimes exploited that. Told her she would be deported if she reported him. She believed him. Lived in terror for 8 months before finally leaving the country. Dante entered with another folder. "Boss, we got confirmation on the 2 from 3 years ago. Both cases followed the same pattern. Complaints filed, evidence collected, then suddenly the cases were closed. 1 detective on both investigations. Same guy. Let me guess." Victor's tone was knowing. "Detective Paul Hendricks." "How did you know?" "Because Hendricks has been on the Calabrese payroll for 5 years. Dante set the folder down. Any complaint that touches their interests gets routed to him. He makes sure nothing sticks. Perfect record of closed cases with no arrests." Lyra set down her teacup with a shaking hand. "So even if I had gone to the police, even if I had reported it immediately, nothing would have happened. Nothing legal." Giancarlo's voice was grim. "The system is corrupted, built to protect men like Grimes and the organizations that profit from them, which is why we are bypassing the system entirely." He pulled out a thicker file, this one containing financial records. But here is what makes it worse. Grimes does not just assault his tenants, he profits from it. Look at this. He spread out bank statements. Each time a woman files a complaint and then drops it, Grimes receives a payment from Riverside Investments. $5,000 per incident. They are paying him. Lyra's voice was horrified. The Calabrese family is paying him to assault women. Not directly, Victor clarified. The payments are listed as property maintenance reimbursements. But the timing is too consistent to be coincidence. Every dropped complaint, every woman who disappears, Grimes gets paid. It is incentivized predation. How many times? Lyra asked. 14 payments in 4 years. Giancarlo's jaw was tight. 14 women we know about. Could be more who never reported, who were too afraid or too ashamed or too convinced no one would believe them. The room went silent, the magnitude of what they had uncovered settling like ash. This was not one bad man making one terrible choice. This was systematic, organized, profitable. What about evidence? Lyra looked at the files covering the table. You have all of this: bank records, witness statements, police reports. Can you not take this to someone? The FBI? A prosecutor? We could. Victor's tone suggested they had already considered this. But here is the problem. The bank records were obtained through methods that would not be admissible in court. The witness statements are from women too terrified to testify. And the police reports all show cases that were officially closed due to lack of evidence. So legally, this is worthless. Giancarlo stated it plainly. No prosecutor would touch it. No judge would allow it. And attempting to pursue legal channels would alert the Calabrese family that we are moving against their asset. They would shut everything down, intimidate the witnesses, make the evidence disappear. Then what is the point of gathering all of this? Lyra gestured at the files. If none of it can be used, it can be used. Giancarlo's voice went cold. Just not in a courtroom. This evidence tells us exactly who Kenneth Grimes is. It shows his pattern, his methods, his protections, and most importantly, it shows us his vulnerabilities. You are going after him, not a question, a realization. We are delivering justice the only way that will work. He looked at her directly. The kind of justice the system refuses to provide. But before we move, I need to know you understand what that means. What we are going to do exists outside the law. It will be permanent, irreversible. Will it stop him? Lyra's voice was steady. Will it protect other women from going through what I went through? What Jessica and Emma and Sarah and all the others went through? Yes. Then I understand. She met his eyes. And I want you to do it. Giancarlo closed the briefcase. Victor, reach out to our contact. Set up a meeting with Angelo Calabrese for tomorrow. We present him with this evidence and give him the opportunity to cut Grimes loose. And if he refuses, then we move without his blessing. Giancarlo stood. And we make very clear that protecting predators comes with consequences, even for families as established as the Calabrese operation. Dante gathered the files. What about the detective? Hendricks? He is part of this too. One problem at a time. Giancarlo moved toward the door. First we handle Grimes, then we decide what to do about the corruption that protected him. The meeting with Angelo Calabrese happened at 10:30 the next morning in a neutral location, a social club in Little Italy that had hosted peace talks between families for 3 generations. Giancarlo arrived with Victor, leaving Dante at the safe house with Lyra. The briefcase containing evidence sat between them like a loaded weapon. Angelo Calabrese was 68, silver-haired, carrying the weight of decades in organized crime with practiced dignity. He sat across from Giancarlo, 2 of his own men flanking him, his expression carefully neutral. You requested this meeting. Angelo's voice was cultured, betraying no emotion. I am listening. Giancarlo opened the briefcase, spread the files across the table. Kenneth Grimes, one of your protected assets. He pays tribute to your organization. In exchange, you provide cover for his activities. Angelo glanced at the documents but did not touch them. What of it? The arrangement is standard, Nothing that concerns you. It concerns me when those activities include the systematic assault of vulnerable women. Giancarlo pushed the witness statements forward. 7 confirmed victims. Likely more who never came forward. Your protection has enabled a predator to operate with impunity for 4 years. Angelo's expression hardened slightly. You come to my table to lecture me about morality? A man in your position? I come to offer you the opportunity to distance yourself from something that will damage your reputation. Giancarlo's voice remained level. When this becomes public, and it will become public, the Calabrese name will be associated with protecting a rapist. Your organization will be linked to incentivized violence against women. That is not the legacy you want. Are you threatening exposure? I am stating reality. Victor spoke for the first time. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. Right now, this stays between us. But if you insist on protecting Grimes, we will be forced to take this to channels that will not be discreet. Angelo was silent for a long moment, studying the files. Then he looked up. What do you want? I want Grimes removed from your protection. Giancarlo met his eyes. Immediately. Completely. No retaliation against any of his victims. No interference when we handle this our way. You want my permission to move against an asset that pays us regularly. I want your acknowledgement that some things are not worth the profit, that your organization has standards, that you do not provide cover for predators, regardless of how much they pay. The room went tense. Angelo's men shifted slightly. Victor remained absolutely still, hands visible, but ready. Giancarlo showed no concern, projecting confidence that bordered on arrogance. Finally, Angelo spoke. You put me in a difficult position, Christopher. If I agree, I look weak. If I refuse, you make this public and damage my reputation. Either way, I lose. You lose less by choosing principle over profit. Giancarlo closed the briefcase. And you gain something more valuable. Respect. The knowledge that even in our world there are lines. That the Calabrese family does not shelter monsters. Angelo studied him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. Grimes's protection is withdrawn. Effective immediately. What you do with him is your business. But the properties revert to Riverside Investments. That is non-negotiable. The properties transfer to his victims. Giancarlo's tone allowed no argument. Starting with Lyra Hart, she gets his primary building, the one she was renting from. The others go to the women whose lives he destroyed. That is how this ends. You are asking for a lot. I am asking for justice. There is a difference. Angelo leaned back, considered. Then he extended his hand. Done. The properties transfer. Grimes loses our protection. But Christopher, understand this. If your handling of this situation causes problems for my organization, if it draws unwanted attention, we will revisit this conversation under less friendly circumstances. Giancarlo shook his hand. Understood. This will be quiet, professional, and permanent. By 6 o'clock that evening, Kenneth Grimes was sitting in a chair in a warehouse on the industrial waterfront, hands zip-tied behind his back, 2 of Giancarlo's men flanking him. The space was dimly lit, cold, smelling of rust and old concrete. A single bulb hung overhead, casting harsh shadows. Grimes had been collected from his office at 4:30. No warning, no explanation, just 2 men appearing and escorting him to a waiting car. Now he sat sweating despite the cold, fear radiating from him in waves. Giancarlo entered at 6:15, Victor behind him carrying the briefcase. He pulled up a chair, sat across from Grimes, said nothing for a full minute, just stared. Let the fear build. Do you know who I am? Giancarlo finally asked. Grimes nodded quickly. Everyone knows who you are. Then you know I do not make idle threats. I do not waste time on meaningless gestures. When I act, it is decisive and permanent. Do you understand? I do not know why I am here. Grimes's voice shook. I have not done anything to you. I do not operate anywhere near your territory. You operate under Calabrese protection. Giancarlo kept his voice neutral. Or rather, you did. That protection was withdrawn 2 hours ago, which means you are currently sitting here with no backup, no leverage, and no way out except through me. The color drained from Grimes's face. I pay my tribute. I have never missed a payment. Your payments are no longer accepted. Victor opened the briefcase, began laying out files. Because the Calabrese family does not shelter rapists. Not when the evidence is this overwhelming. Grimes stared at the files, recognition and panic crossing his features. Those are sealed police reports. You cannot have those. We have everything. Giancarlo's voice went cold. 7 victims, 14 payments, 4 years of systematic assault protected by corruption and money, and as of today, that protection is gone. What do you want? Grimes's voice cracked. Money? I have savings. Property. I can pay whatever you want. I want you to understand something very clearly. Giancarlo leaned forward. You have 2 choices. Only 2. And you will make this decision right now. No delays. No negotiations. What choices? You leave. Tonight. You sign over all 4 of your properties to the names I provide. You withdraw all your bank accounts and leave half with me for distribution to your victims. You disappear. New city, new name, new life, and you never, ever come back. And the other choice? Giancarlo smiled, cold and empty. You refuse, and I demonstrate exactly what happens to predators who hide behind corrupt systems. Your body will be found in pieces over the next 3 weeks, and every organization in this city will know why. Will know that Christopher Giancarlo does not tolerate men who prey on the helpless. Grimes was shaking now, tears starting. I will leave. I will sign whatever you want. Just please, I have a family. So did your victims. Victor's voice was flat. So did Lyra Hart when you destroyed her life. Funny how you are suddenly concerned about family. The papers are already prepared. Giancarlo pulled out a stack of documents. Sign them, now. Grimes' hands shook so badly he could barely hold the pen Victor provided after cutting the zip ties. The first document was a property deed transfer. Building at 427 Oak Street to Lyra Hart. Full ownership. No liens, no conditions. Sign at the bottom. Initial each page. Giancarlo watched every stroke of the pen like a judge witnessing an execution order. Grimes signed, his handwriting barely legible through the trembling. Next document. Victor slid another paper forward, building at 815 Maple Avenue to Jessica Ramirez. She is gone. Grimes's voice cracked. She moved away years ago. We found her. Giancarlo's tone was flat. She will be informed that she now owns a building worth $400,000. Compensation for what you took from her. Sign. The pen scratched across paper. Another signature. Another piece of Grimes's empire transferred to the women he had victimized. 6 more documents followed, each one a property transfer or bank account liquidation, each one a piece of justice delivered through paperwork instead of courtrooms. By the time Grimes finished signing, he had surrendered everything he owned except the clothes on his back and $20,000 for relocation expenses. Victor collected the documents, photographed each signature with his phone, sent them to a lawyer waiting to file the transfers immediately. Everything would be recorded tonight. Legal, binding, irreversible. You have 72 hours to leave the city. Giancarlo stood, looking down at the broken man in the chair. If you are still here after that, if we even hear a rumor that you have contacted any of your former tenants, the agreement is void, and we proceed to option 2. I understand. Grimes could barely speak. I will leave tonight, Not yet. Giancarlo nodded to Victor. One more thing. Victor pulled out a phone, set it to record, pointed it at Grimes. You are going to make a statement. Full confession. Every assault, every threat, every payment you received for destroying those women's lives, you are going to say it all on camera. No. Grimes shook his head frantically. That is evidence. That could be used against me. Exactly. Giancarlo's smile was cold. It is insurance. If you break our agreement, if you come back, if you cause problems for any of those women, this confession goes to every news station in the state. It goes to the FBI. It goes viral on the internet. You will be famous for all the wrong reasons. You said if I cooperated, I said you could leave with your life. This is part of cooperation. Victor kept the camera steady. Start talking. Now. It took 23 minutes for Grimes to confess everything. Each assault described in clinical detail, each victim named, each payment acknowledged. By the end, he was crying openly, snot running down his face, the pathetic display of a predator stripped of power and protection. Victor stopped recording, saved the file to 3 separate locations. Done. You can go. Just like that? Just like that. Giancarlo moved toward the warehouse door. You have 72 hours. Use them wisely. They left Grimes sitting in that chair, hands free, papers scattered around him, crying in the dim light. One of Giancarlo's men would drive him to collect a single suitcase from his office, then to the bus station. By morning, Kenneth Grimes would be 3 states away, starting over with nothing. Giancarlo returned to the safe house at 9:45 that night. Lyra was in the living room, reading a book Dante had brought her, trying to distract herself from the waiting. She looked up when he entered, hope and fear mixed in equal measure on her face. It is done. He set his briefcase down. Grimes signed everything. The building is yours, full ownership, no mortgage, no conditions. It will be officially recorded tomorrow morning. Lyra stared at him. The building, my building, your building, 4 units, 2 currently rented to long-term tenants who have been paying on time and causing no problems. The 3rd unit is vacant and has been professionally cleaned. You can move in whenever you are ready. The 4th unit can generate income or be kept vacant. Your choice. I own a building. She said it like testing the words. I went from not being able to afford rent to owning a building. Justice is not always about punishment. Victor entered behind Giancarlo. Sometimes it is about restoration, giving back what was stolen. You deserved safety and stability. Now you have both. What about him? Grimes? Gone. Giancarlo sat across from her. By tomorrow night, he will be in another state. New name, new life. If he is smart, he will never return. If he is not smart, he will discover that our agreement only protects him as long as he stays away. The confession Victor recorded ensures that, Dante added. One wrong move and his entire life becomes public knowledge. He will not risk it. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then what about the others? The other women? Already being contacted. Victor pulled out his phone, showed her a list. Jessica Ramirez now owns a building in the suburbs. Emma Chen received a cash settlement and deed to a small apartment complex. Sarah Kim, who left the country, is being tracked down through family. We are making sure every victim receives compensation. This feels impossible. Lyra looked at the 3 men. Like a dream. It is real. Giancarlo's voice was firm. And it is permanent. The deeds are being filed. The bank transfers are being processed. By noon tomorrow, everything will be legally recorded and irreversible. Why? She asked the question that had been haunting her. Why go this far? Why risk conflict with the Calabrese family? Why give us these properties instead of keeping them yourself? Because some things matter more than profit. Giancarlo met her eyes. because those properties were bought with the money Grimes earned from exploiting vulnerable women. Selling them would make us complicit. Giving them to you and the others is the only acceptable outcome. Victor stood. We should let you rest. Tomorrow is a big day. Property inspections, meeting with lawyers, figuring out your new life. What do I owe you? Lyra's voice was small. For all of this, there must be a price. There is no price. Giancarlo moved toward the door. You owe nothing. This was justice, not a transaction. But people like you always want something. Then consider me an exception. He paused at the threshold. Sleep well, Lyra. Tomorrow you wake up as a property owner, as someone with security, as someone who never has to be afraid of a landlord again. The door closed behind them, leaving Lyra alone with the impossible reality of her new life. Word spread through the neighborhood like smoke. By 10:30 the next morning, when the property deeds were officially recorded at the county clerk's office, 3 people had already called the local diner, asking if it was true. By noon, when Lyra walked into her building for the first time as its owner, a small crowd had gathered across the street, watching with curious eyes. The waitress who got hurt. That is what they called her initially. The girl who collapsed at Giancarlo's table. But by afternoon, the story had evolved. The girl Giancarlo protected. The girl he went to war for. At the Italian bakery on the corner, Mrs. DeLuca whispered to her customers. You heard what he did? Took on the Calabrese family for that poor child. Made Grimes sign over everything. The man is gone. Left town in the middle of the night like a thief. At the barber shop, men debated the implications. Dangerous move, going after Calabrese assets. But Giancarlo must have had permission. No way Angelo would let that slide otherwise. At the laundromat, mothers discussed it while folding clothes. Maybe he is not as bad as we thought. Maybe there are lines even he will not cross. Did you hear he gave the building to her? Did not keep it for himself, just gave it away. By evening, when Giancarlo walked into the same diner where Lyra had collapsed 3 days earlier, the reaction was different. The usual silence still fell. The usual fear still rippled through the room. But underneath it was something new. Curiosity. Respect. The complex acknowledgement that monsters sometimes did monstrous things to other monsters, and sometimes that made them something else entirely. The owner, an older man named Sal who had run the diner for 30 years, approached the table with coffee. On the house, Mr. Giancarlo. And I want to say, what you did for that girl. It was a good thing. A right thing. Giancarlo accepted the coffee, said nothing. But Sal continued anyway. My daughter works nights, walks home alone sometimes. Knowing you will not let men like Grimes operate here. That matters to fathers. That matters to families. I did not do it for recognition. I know. That is why it matters. Sal returned to the counter, but his words hung in the air. At 11:15 that night, Giancarlo received a call from one of his lieutenants. Boss, we have a situation. Not a problem exactly, but something you should know about. What situation? 3 businesses on Oak Street sent representatives to the warehouse. They want to thank you. They brought gifts, wine, food, an envelope of cash. They are waiting outside. Send them home. I do not want their gratitude. They are not leaving. They say they need to acknowledge what you did, that the neighborhood is safer because of it, that their daughters and sisters and wives can sleep better. Giancarlo was silent for a moment. Then, fine. 5 minutes. No speeches. When he arrived at the warehouse, a small delegation was indeed waiting. Shop owners, restaurant managers, ordinary citizens who had lived in fear of Grimes and the corruption that protected him. They stood nervously as Giancarlo approached, clearly uncertain how this audience would be received. An older woman stepped forward, holding a bakery box. Mr. Giancarlo, my granddaughter worked at one of Grimes's buildings. He made advances. She quit, rather than report it because she knew nothing would happen. What you did, making him pay, making him leave. You did what the law would not. We wanted you to know it is noticed. It is appreciated. Giancarlo accepted the box, but his expression remained neutral. The law should have handled this. The fact that I had to is a failure of the system, but you did handle it. A younger man spoke up. When the system failed, you stepped in. That means something in this neighborhood. It does not make me a hero. Giancarlo's voice was firm. I am still who I was yesterday. This does not change that. Maybe not. The older woman smiled slightly. But it changes how we see you. There is a difference between a man who takes what he wants and a man who protects those who cannot protect themselves. You can be both things. We understand that now. The delegation left shortly after, their gifts accepted, but their gratitude kept at arm's length. But the shift had happened. The neighborhood's perception of Christopher Giancarlo had evolved from pure fear to something more complex, still dangerous. Still someone to avoid crossing, but also someone who might, under the right circumstances, be counted on to act when others would not. At the safe house, Lyra watched the local news at 11:30. The story had made it to television, though sanitized and vague. Property owner Kenneth Grimes quietly departed the area following the transfer of multiple properties to former tenants. Sources suggest the unusual arrangement was brokered by unnamed community advocates. The Calabrese family declined to comment. Community advocates. Lyra almost smiled at the euphemism. That was one way to describe what Giancarlo had done. Dante sat in his usual position by the door. You know what this means, right? You are going to be famous in this neighborhood. The girl Giancarlo saved. I do not want to be famous. Too late. Word is already out. People are calling you brave, calling him a hero. The whole thing is becoming legend. He is not a hero. Lyra's voice was quiet. He is a complicated man who did a good thing. That does not erase what he is. No. Dante agreed. But it does not erase what he did either. Sometimes people are both things. Sometimes the world is not simple enough for easy labels. Through the window, Lyra could see the city lights. Somewhere out there, her building stood with her name on the deed. Somewhere out there, Grimes was running with nothing but shame and fear. Somewhere out there, 6 other women were learning they had been given back pieces of what was stolen. And somewhere out there, Christopher Giancarlo was dealing with the strange reality of being seen as something other than simply dangerous, of being complicated, of being human. The town had whispered before about his crimes, his violence, his power. Now they whispered about something else. About the mafia boss who stood up for a waitress, who went to war with the Calabrese family over principle, who gave away properties instead of keeping them. The whispers would spread, the story would grow, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 weeks later, Lyra walked without pain for the first time since that night. The physical therapy Doc Ferraro had arranged was working. The internal injuries were healing. The bruises had faded from purple to yellow to nothing. Her body was recovering, slowly but steadily, reclaiming itself from trauma. She stood in the vacant third-floor unit of her building, the one Grimes had used as storage, now completely renovated. Fresh paint on the walls, new floors. Sunlight streaming through clean windows. This would be her home. Not rented, not borrowed, hers. Victor had overseen the renovation personally, ensuring everything was done to her specifications. The kitchen had new appliances. The bathroom had been completely rebuilt. The bedroom faced east, catching morning light. It was small, but perfect. A sanctuary built from the ashes of nightmare. The 2 other units remained rented to their long-term tenants, an elderly couple on the first floor and a young teacher on the second. Both had paid rent on time for years. Both had been quietly terrified of Grimes. Both had wept with relief when Lyra introduced herself as the new owner, promising fair treatment and maintained properties. She was learning to be a landlord, learning about taxes and insurance and building codes. Victor had connected her with an honest accountant. Dante had recommended a reliable handyman. The building was generating modest income, enough that Lyra no longer had to work multiple shifts to survive. But she wanted to work, needed to. Sitting idle felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. At 2:30 that afternoon, she walked into a small cafe 3 blocks from her building. Quiet place, local clientele, run by a woman named Helena, who had known about Grimes and had quietly hired several of his former tenants over the years, asking no questions, offering stability. "I am looking for work." Lyra stood at the counter, hands steady. "Part-time, flexible hours. I own a building now, so I need to be available for tenant issues, but I want to keep working, keep routine." Helena studied her with knowing eyes. "You are the girl everyone is talking about, the one Giancarlo helped. I am Lyra Hart. And yes, he helped me, but I do not want to be defined by that. I want to be defined by what I do next." Helena smiled. "Can you start tomorrow?" "Morning shift, 7 to 1. Easy pace. We do not get the late-night crowd, mostly regulars. Coffee and conversation." "That sounds perfect. One condition." Helena's expression was serious. "If you ever feel unsafe, if anyone gives you trouble, you tell me immediately. We look out for each other here. Thank you." Lyra's voice caught slightly. "I appreciate that more than you know." That evening, Giancarlo visited the building for the first time since the property transfer. He found Lyra on the 3rd floor, arranging furniture, transforming the empty space into a home. "It looks good." He stood in the doorway, not entering without permission. "You have done well with the renovations." Victor helped. She set down a lamp, gestured to the room. "I never thought I would own anything. Now I own this entire building. It still does not feel real. It is real, and it is deserved." He paused. "I wanted to check on you. Make sure you have everything you need. I start a new job tomorrow. At Helena's cafe. Part-time. Something to keep me busy while I figure out being a landlord." "That is good. Staying active, building routine." He moved slightly, his profile catching the evening light. "The protection continues. Quietly. You will not see my people, but they are watching, making sure no one bothers you." "For how long?" "As long as necessary." His voice was firm. "The Grimes situation is resolved, but there are others like him, men who might see you as vulnerable. They need to know you are not." "I am not vulnerable." She met his eyes. "Not anymore. I survived. I own property. I have income. I have a future. That is not vulnerability." "No." A slight smile touched his lips. "It is not. But having protection does not diminish your strength. It is just insurance." "Why do you keep doing this?" Lyra asked what had been weighing on her. "You got Grimes. You made things right. You could walk away now. Why stay involved?" Giancarlo was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the street below. "Because for most of my life, power meant taking, controlling, forcing outcomes that benefited me." He turned back to her. "But protecting you, helping you rebuild, that is a different kind of power. The kind that actually means something. You are not responsible for me. I know, but I choose to be responsible anyway." He moved toward the door. "That choice, that decision to protect instead of exploit, is the most meaningful thing I have done in a decade. Will you tell me about them?" Lyra's question stopped him. "The other women, Jessica and Emma and Sarah. Are they okay?" "Jessica is using her building as a group home for single mothers. Emma finished college and is applying to law school. Sarah returned from overseas last week and cried for an hour when she learned about the property." His voice carried satisfaction. "They are all rebuilding, all moving forward, because you made it possible, because the system failed and someone had to act." He paused at the threshold. Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new beginning, the first day of work in a life where you do not have to be afraid. After he left, Lyra stood at the window watching the street. The city lights were coming on, casting warm glows across the neighborhood. Her neighborhood now, her building, her home, her future. She thought about that night in the diner, the pain, the fear, the desperate stumble toward the only people who looked powerful enough to help. She had whispered those words that cracked everything open. I cannot close my legs. It hurts. Now she could walk without pain, could work without fear, could sleep without nightmares, could own property, and build a life and look forward instead of constantly back. The mafia boss who had seemed like another threat had turned out to be her salvation. Not because he was good, but because he chose to act when it mattered. Because he found purpose in protection. Because he proved that even dangerous men could draw lines, could choose principle over profit, could deliver justice when the system failed. The town would keep whispering, keep telling the story, keep transforming it into legend, and Lyra would keep living, keep working, keep building. No longer the girl who collapsed in pain, no longer the victim who needed saving, just Lyra Hart, property owner, survivor, woman who learned that sometimes salvation came from unexpected places, delivered by complicated people who were neither purely good nor purely evil. Just human, just choosing, just trying to do better. And sometimes, that was enough. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.